It's the year of the Bicentennial. 1976, America's 200th birthday. Fireworks lit the sky. Flags waved from every porch. Patriotic songs filled the air. And while the country was busy celebrating, something quietly extraordinary happened in the U.S. Mint, something hidden inside one of the smallest coins we carry, a Roosevelt dime. You see, the spotlight in 1976 was on the special bicentennial quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins. Each of them bore commemorative reverse designs: drums, Liberty Bells, Independence Halls. Collectors hoarded them, and the nation noticed, but the dime, it stayed the same. No redesign. No fanfare. Just the usual portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, the familiar torch, olive branch, and oak on the reverse. It quietly rolled off the presses in the background, like it always had, but that silence, that's where the secret lived, because while no one was paying attention, a few of those 1976 Roosevelt dimes, particularly those struck in the Philadelphia Mint, were minted with errors so rare, so shocking, they would one day become numismatic legends, and one of them would go on to sell for $197,000. Let's rewind to how that happened. The 1970s were a chaotic time in minting history. The country was transitioning away from silver coinage, refining clad compositions, and updating equipment. Mistakes weren't uncommon, but in 1976, the country's attention was so focused on the three bicentennial coins that no one expected the dime to be the true rarity of the year. The Roosevelt dime was produced in massive quantities. Over 500 million were struck in Philadelphia alone. But hidden within that sea of copper-nickel-clad coins were a few bizarre outliers, coins that defied logic, and rewrote the rules of error collecting. One such coin was discovered in the early 2000s. It looked like any other 1976 Roosevelt dime, until it hit the scale. It was too light. Then came the metallurgical test. It wasn't made of copper-nickel at all. It was struck on a pure silver planchet, something that was supposed to have been phased out over a decade earlier. Collectors were stunned. It wasn't a proof. It wasn't part of a commemorative set. It was just a regular Roosevelt dime with a date of 1976, struck in silver. And it had somehow made it through the minting process, escaped into circulation, and survived all these years. Graded by PCGS, this coin sold for over $34,000. But that was just the beginning. Another specimen appeared not long after, this time with a different kind of error, a full blockage. That's when a previously struck coin fails to eject and is struck again over a blank planchet, causing one side to have a mirrored image of the other. It's rare, stunning to look at, and nearly impossible to fake. The 1976 Roosevelt dime with this full blockage sold at a private auction for $58,000. Then came the big one. A collector, leafing through a hoard of old dimes inherited from their grandfather, noticed something strange. A 1976 Roosevelt dime that looked off. The date was bold. But the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty," showed faint, ghost-like doubling. Under magnification, it was confirmed, a dramatic double die obverse. This wasn't the typical machine doubling that plagues modern coins. This was crisp. Intentional. A true doubling caused by a misalignment in the die creation process. PCGS graded it mint state, near flawless. The auction house called it the finest known of its kind, and when the bidding ended, that tiny, 10-cent coin sold for $197,000. What makes it so valuable isn't just the doubling. It's the context, because no one was supposed to be looking at dimes in 1976. All eyes were on the flashy coins. Which means fewer people saved them, fewer were scrutinized, and any error that made it through did so completely undetected. These rare dimes are what numismatists call ghost errors. They exist in plain sight, but no one's looking for them. Other versions of the 1976 Roosevelt dime have surfaced over the years with off-center strikes, where Roosevelt's portrait is shifted entirely to one side, with visible blank space on the opposite rim, broad strikes, where the collar didn't properly hold the coin during striking, leading to expanded, warped edges, wrong planchet strikes, including dimes struck on foreign blanks or penny planchets, leading to completely different weights and sizes. Each of these errors, depending on condition, has sold for anywhere from $12,000 to $80,000. But the silver planchet and double die examples remain the pinnacle, especially in uncirculated, mint state condition. So, what should you look for? First, check any 1976 Roosevelt dimes you come across, especially if they feel lighter or heavier than normal, show doubling on Liberty, In God We Trust, or the date, appear slightly off color, silver, reddish, or even golden hues. Have warped edges or incomplete rims, show off-center designs or mirrored impressions, weigh them. A standard clad dime weighs 2.27 grams. Anything significantly over or under that is worth investigating, flip them. If the reverse isn't properly aligned with the obverse, it could indicate a rotated die, and never clean your coin. That can destroy its value. If you suspect you have something rare, place it in a protective holder and send it to a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC, because the next dime you overlook could be the one that changes your life. The 1976 Roosevelt dime, quiet, ignored, and unchanged, was never supposed to be special, and yet, a handful of them are worth small fortunes, not 10 cents, not even $10. But up to $197,000. So dig through your old coins. Check those change jars. Peek into forgotten drawers, because in the year America celebrated its 200th birthday, it may have secretly minted one of the most valuable dimes in history. It's small. It's light. It's overlooked. The Roosevelt dime, especially the one minted in Denver in 1983, doesn't exactly scream treasure. Most of us wouldn't give it a second glance. But that's the thing about history. About value. It's not always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper hidden in your pocket change, because some 1983 D Roosevelt dimes are worth not just 10 cents, but up to $117,000. And to understand how that's even possible, you have to journey into the world of numismatics, where mistakes are miracles, and rarity writes legends. Let's set the scene. It's 1983. America is coming out of a recession. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. The compact disc is brand new. The internet? Still just a whisper among scientists. And in Denver, at the United States Mint, the presses are running fast, churning out millions of Roosevelt dimes for everyday circulation. The dime hadn't changed in decades. Same profile of FDR. Same torch, olive branch, and oak on the reverse. No commemorative editions. No fancy silver sets that year. Just mass production. But the thing about mass production is, it's not perfect, and in 1983, perfection quietly slipped. Somewhere on the mint floor in Denver, a wrong blank, a foreign or leftover planchet, found its way into the dime press. Instead of the standard copper-nickel clad dime blank, a planchet made of a different metal, possibly silver, or copper zinc, was struck using the regular Roosevelt dies. The result? A dime that looked familiar, but was not right. It was lighter. Or heavier. Its color wasn't quite what it should have been. And in some cases, the imprint wasn't as crisp, because the dies were set to strike a harder, clad blank, not a softer one. So when this off-metal planchet took the hit, it absorbed the strike differently, but these were subtle differences. Enough to fool a casual glance. And that's exactly why they slipped into circulation. Years passed. The economy changed. Dimes came and went. But one day, decades later, a sharp-eyed collector noticed something strange in their coin jar. A 1983 D Roosevelt dime with an odd tone, almost silver, but without the reeded edge that typically indicates a silver coin. It felt different. It weighed different. They sent it in for grading. It came back authenticated. A 1983 D Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign planchet, possibly intended for a Guatemalan or Jamaican coin minted under U.S. contract. Wrong weight. Wrong metal. But the design was correct. A genuine U.S. error. It sold at auction for $26,000. That was just the beginning. Other collectors began examining their 1983 D dimes. Some discovered off-center strikes, where part of Roosevelt's profile drifted into a crescent of blank metal. Some found double strikes, with ghost images of the date or Liberty floating just above the real design. These double-struck coins were minting hiccups frozen in time, pieces that should have been destroyed but weren't. In 1983, D dime with a double strike on a foreign planchet, in high mint state condition, fetched $46,000 at auction, and then came the showstopper. A collector submitted a 1983 D Roosevelt dime to PCGS. The dime had a perfect double die obverse, clear doubling of the lettering, especially, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty." This doubling was dramatic, not a faint blur, but a distinct, sharp second impression. The mint mark D was slightly distorted. Even the date, 1983, had shadowing that couldn't be explained by where. It was confirmed, an extremely rare double die obverse Roosevelt dime, struck in Denver, 1983. It sold at a major numismatic auction for $117,000. Let that sink in. One dime, worth 10 cents, sold for more than the average U.S. annual salary, and here's why. First, no proof sets were issued in 1983. That means every single 1983 D dime came from circulation, not a special collector's release. Which also means, if an error happened, it went directly into the public's hands. Second, the Denver Mint didn't produce Roosevelt dimes with known errors that year, at least not intentionally. So the few that did escape, especially with exotic anomalies like double dies or foreign planchets, are extremely rare. It's the smallest coin in your pocket. The one that slips through the cracks of couches. The one we barely even notice anymore. A dime. 10 cents. Just enough to feel useless these days. We toss them into jars, ignore them on sidewalks, let them rattle in glove compartments. But what if I told you that one particular dime, one made in 2004, could be worth a small fortune, not 10 cents. Not $10. But up to $90,000. Yes, the 2004 P. Roosevelt dime, minted in Philadelphia, might look like 1,000 others. But some of these tiny, everyday coins contain a secret. A minting anomaly so rare, so unexpected, that when discovered, it sends shockwaves through the numismatic world. To understand how that's possible, we have to go back to the beginning. 2004 wasn't a monumental year in American coinage. There were no design overhauls for the dime. No new series, no fanfare. Just a regular Roosevelt dime, bearing the image of the 32nd president, struck by the billions. But that's exactly why it matters, because when no one is watching, mistakes happen. It all started at the Philadelphia Mint. Every coin facility runs like a precision machine. Blanks, called planchets, are fed into presses where dies strike both the obverse and reverse images onto the metal. Quality control is tight, but not infallible. Somewhere along the line, a few 2004 Roosevelt dimes slipped through the cracks, flawed, misstruck, or struck on the wrong metal entirely. That's where the mystery begins. A few years after their release, coin collectors started noticing something strange. Certain 2004 P. Roosevelt dimes looked different. They were lighter in weight, slightly off in color, and under magnification, the details didn't quite align with other dimes from the same year. Upon professional examination, the truth came out: some of these dimes had been struck on planchets intended for foreign coins. Yes, you heard that right. During production, a few planchets from a completely different coin series, possibly coins intended for countries under U.S. minting contracts, were accidentally fed into the Roosevelt dime press. The result? A U.S. dime, struck with all the correct design elements, but made from the wrong material. That alone would have made it valuable. But one particular specimen took the rarity to another level. It wasn't just struck on a foreign planchet. It was also double struck, with one of the strikes visibly off-center. Imagine that, a Roosevelt dime, made from an entirely wrong metal, struck twice, each time leaving ghost-like impressions and doubling of letters and outlines. It wasn't just a coin anymore. It was art. A perfect storm of minting error and mechanical poetry. Collectors and grading services immediately recognized its rarity. It was submitted to PCGS, the professional coin grading service. The coin was confirmed to be genuine, an authentic 2004 P. Roosevelt dime struck on a 90% silver planchet, likely leftover from another minting process. The weight was off. The metal composition was wrong. The strike was doubled. The error was undeniable, and the auction world took notice. When the coin was offered at public sale, bids came quickly, and they didn't stop. By the time the gavel fell, this tiny dime, barely larger than a thumbnail, had sold for over $32,000. But the story doesn't end there. Another variation of the 2004 P dime was discovered with a misaligned die strike, where the reverse of the coin was dramatically off-center while the obverse remained nearly perfect. This type of error, called a die alignment or rotation error, is rare, especially when it's so severe that it makes the coin look like it's twisting between two designs. Collectors love these errors, not just for the rarity, but for the visual impact. And in high mint state condition, one of these misaligned 2004 P dimes sold privately for an estimated $40,000. Later, another piece surfaced, a broad-struck dime, meaning it was struck outside the collar that normally shapes the coin's edges. The result? A warped, stretched coin with ghost-like rims, but still with Roosevelt's face staring stoically into history. In pristine condition, this error drew a collector's bid north of $50,000. And then came the grand prize. A 2004 P Roosevelt dime with a triple strike on a foreign planchet, verified as mint state, sold through a specialized numismatic auction for a jaw-dropping $90,000. All from a coin most of us never even bother to flip over. So why does this coin, worth only 10 cents in theory, command such outrageous prices in practice? It's the perfect storm of factors. First, the low attention the coin drew at the time of its release. There were no special mint sets or commemoratives drawing scrutiny. It was business as usual, which meant no one was looking for anomalies. Second, the type of error. Planchet errors, especially involving foreign metal blanks, are incredibly rare. They often result from leftover blanks from U.S. contracts to mint coins for other nations, accidentally mixed with U.S. blanks. These planchets might have a completely different composition, thickness, and intended size, yet they were struck with American dies. Third, the condition. These valuable coins weren't just mistakes, they were crisp, clean, and often uncirculated. That makes their survival even more unbelievable. Most error coins are noticed and destroyed long before they leave the mint. The fact that these escaped, survived in near-perfect condition, and then resurfaced years later? That's what collectors dream about. And lastly, the size. There's something poetic about the smallest coin holding the biggest secret. A dime you could lose in a heartbeat, being worth enough to pay off student loans, buy a car, or put a down payment on a home. So how do you find one? Start by checking every 2004 P Roosevelt dime you come across. Look for color anomalies, silver tone that looks too pure, or a reddish hue suggesting copper. Unusual weight. Standard dimes weigh 2.27 grams. Anything lighter or heavier is worth weighing again. Double or off-center strikes, ghost images, overlapping letters, or crescent shapes on the rim are key indicators. Soft edges or expanded rims, signs of broad strike errors. Reverse rotation, flip the coin vertically. If the reverse isn't aligned, you might have a rotation error, and if you find something odd, don't clean it. Don't spend it. Don't file it down or try to fix it. Just place it in a protective sleeve and get it professionally graded. PCGS or NGC can confirm its authenticity and value, because that little coin at the bottom of your drawer, it might not be worth 10 cents. It might be worth $32,000, or even $90,000. And all it takes is 1 second. One closer look. One moment of curiosity, to turn pocket change into a life-changing discovery.